is the Bearcast, presented by Bird Culture Ford. Bird Culture Ford has been in Waco since 1936. Ford is the #1 selling truck in Texas 43 years running. The Bearcast is also presented by WellMed Medical Management and USMD Health System Dallas. Here's Craig Smoke and Grayson Grundhafer.
Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome into a brand new edition of the Bearcast on Sic'Em365.com. It was a very busy week for Baylor athletics, with spring sports winning some championships in some cases, postseason starting, and a record-breaking NFL draft for Baylor football. 6 draft picks, 11 players signing either pick deals or undrafted free agent deals by the end of the weekend. And that is a number that was pretty awesome to see. We're going to be talking about the NFL draft and where guys landed, and spring sports and much more throughout this episode. I'm Craig Smoke, Sic'Em365 radio host, joined as always by Grayson Grundhafer, Sic'Em365 director of broadcasting, also team and recruiting reporter. And we've got a lot to get to, but Grayson, it was one heck of an NFL draft weekend for Baylor football.
Yeah, I mean, how cool was that? I mean, they did a terrific job. It was just really fun to see that, and it just really showed how far Baylor's come, right, as far as trust with NFL GMs. I mean, back in the day, it just felt like even their really good players, some of them didn't get drafted. Whereas in this draft, it was like very consistently, these guys are getting drafted. Not only are these guys getting drafted, teams are trading up in some cases to get these guys like Taekwon Thornton, who we're going to talk about. But I just thought it was such an amazing event for Baylor, amazing event for the brand, and an amazing event for all of those guys, all the guys who have played at Baylor in the past, and for Dave Rand and the staff. I mean, just kudos to them, for building these guys, developing them, and credit to everyone who's molded these guys. But it just was a fantastic event, I think, for Baylor Nation as a whole.
Yeah, a lot of people deserve credit, not just one or a couple people. A whole lot of people, past and present, do. It was an awesome weekend. Like we said, it was record-breaking, 6 picks. You may think, oh, well, that happened just a few years ago. But as has been probably pointed out to most at this point, Rico Gathers was not a Baylor football player. So when they had 6 players just a handful of years ago, it matched that total, but it was 6 actual football players, not 5 football players and a basketball player like it was back in, 2016-ish, I think, was when they had that amount. And then, of course, last year, just William Bradley King late in the draft. So we knew this was going to be a big event, and that's why we've been talking about it so much, and why I've been writing about it so much. And, it ended up being even better than expected, which was pretty awesome. You thought the best case scenario, maybe a Jalen Pitre could sneak into the first round, and that did not happen. But it did not take long into the second round for him to get selected. So let's just run this down, the guys who went, and just kind of briefly discuss, where they went, and all that comes with that. So starting things off, I mean, it was that first round, and I think the first round definitely had an effect on any Jalen Pitre first-round buzz, because you had, all of a sudden the Eagles are trading for, A.J. Brown, and then you've got Marquise Brown on the move, and those were just trades happening, much less the fact that the trades were happening, receivers are getting swapped, and then receivers are getting picked. That would come back to help Taekwon Thornton immensely and where he ended up, but it probably pushed Jalen Pitre out of the first round. But still, again, he did not have to wait very long. The lone commit, as he was known, or is known, goes round 2, pick number 37 overall, and 10 minutes away from his home is where he'll be playing. As we learned when he got drafted, he was at the family home, I guess, and we learned that was 10 minutes away from NRG Stadium, home of the Houston Texans, and that is his new team. Jalen Pitre joining Lovie Smith and company. So your thoughts? I think it's as good of a fit as he could have wanted. Lovie Smith loves players from Texas, but he loves defense, and he loves, he has thorough history with the Tampa 2 defense. So, I think all things considered and where they are, they're not Super Bowl contenders. They're rebuilding, so they're just trying to put blocks together, and I think Jalen Pitre is a pretty good foundational piece for them.
Yeah, and I mean, he'll get to come in and play right away. I feel like for that team, they're definitely going to want to see what they have with Jalen Pitre, what he's going to excel at, what he can do really well, and I'm so curious to see what he does on an NFL field because, what we saw last year was just something crazy, something special what he put on film, and I think he's going to be a very nice player for them. He's definitely going to come in and be a culture guy as well, which for a young team is extremely important and extremely underrated because some teams in the NFL, man, they build things the wrong way with the wrong guys, and I think with Pitre, they're getting a great guy who's going to come in, work his tail off, and push others to be really good as well. So I love the landing spot. Obviously, the fact that he's going to stay in Texas is really cool, and I think in general, he's going to get plenty of opportunities to show what he can do at the next level, which is going to be very, very nice for him, I think.
Yep, so he goes off the board first. That was expected. I mentioned that in pretty much every article that he was going to be the first off the board, and he was. But then after that, it was a little bit of a surprise, quite frankly. I thought that we might be waiting until late round 2 and probably even round 3 to hear the next pick. But there were a couple of surprises that were coming up over the next 3 picks, and certainly going to the next one, number 50 overall, the New England Patriots trade up and select Taekwon Thornton, wide receiver. And, to the Patriots, gets the phone call with Bill Belichick. And, again, he benefited from the fact that there was a lot of wide receiver fervor and a lot of trading up for wide receivers and grabbing wide receivers. And so with all, the top guys pretty much plucked away by the end of the first round practically, Taekwon was one of that next wave, and the Patriots reach up and grab him. Makes me feel great. If it had been the Browns or the Jets, I would have thought, well, he'll be out of the league in 2 years, but this actually gives me some hope for him and a lot of these other guys landing on quality teams.
I mean, the fact that they traded up for Taekwon is so cool. He's a top 50 pick, which is massive. I mean, that's draft capital. And that means they really believe in you, and they're spending draft capital to go up and get you. I think this is a perfect fit for him. It gives Mac Jones a deep threat in that offense, and I know they wanted Nelson Agholor to be that for them, and now they got that with Taekwon, and I'm so excited for him. He's got an opportunity to go in there and be the wide receiver 1 in New England. I mean, that's not that crazy of a take that he could be that guy. After the pro day, I kind of felt like he was going to end up being a second or third round guy, but this is probably even more than I could have hoped. I mean, as things got closer to the draft, it felt like people were thinking, oh, he might be a 4th or 5th round pick. But happy to see that a team took a shot on him, and I think he could be a very explosive playmaker for the Patriots, and I think he's going to find his way on the field very early, which again, you need opportunities, and opportunities on a good team are even better, and that's what Taekwon's going to get.
Moving on, you had JT Woods, round 3. So 2 second-round picks for the Bears. Round 3, they'd have a couple more, and JT Woods at 79 overall goes to the LA Chargers. They are a defensive-minded team, although, obviously have a hot young quarterback that they can, lean on, who's the face of the franchise. But really, that's a defensive coach. That's a defensive team. That's a secondary that's loaded up pretty nicely and has Derwin James leading the way for them. Just signed, was it J.C. Jackson this offseason from the Patriots. You got Joey Bosa. You got Khalil Mack. So it's a pretty good situation for JT Woods.
Yeah, you know what the Chargers are trying to do? They're trying to create sacks, and they're trying to create turnovers. And JT Woods is going to fit into that turnover department really, really well for them. Derwin James is there, as you mentioned, so he's going to get to learn from a really, really good safety at the NFL level. This is so interesting. JT Woods got a second-round grade early on in the draft process, and I think as time went on, a lot of people were thinking 4th or 5th round for him, but that grade appeared to be true for him. I mean, pick 79, that's a great spot, but even better than that, he got a great landing spot with the Chargers, a really good team, a really good franchise, and one that's moving in the right direction. And now he gets to be a part of a young and upcoming roster that has a lot of plans for the future. He's going to fit in seamlessly, and honestly, he's not going to be expected to be their best player, which is really awesome as well. He's just going to be a part of a really good team, and I think that's really nice for him.
Moving on along, you had Terrell Bernard. This was another surprise, going a bit higher than expected. It was more of a fifth-round type of a guy. And, that's not just looking at mock drafts. That was pretty much the general consensus. I don't think really too many people had him going third round, but he did go in the third round, 89th overall, just 10 picks after JT. And the craziest introduction probably from draft weekend, NFL Network's Kyle Brandt, obviously a massive Bills fan with the big over-the-top, go Bills whole thing. Yeah. And eventually it was like guy yelling at screen, and it was entertaining. It was fine, but it was just like the moment for me was not about Kyle Brandt. It was about that after all the junk that he said and yelled and screamed and the chicken wing eating and all of that, he named Terrell Bernard. So I was like caught up in what he was doing, and then all of a sudden here's like Terrell Bernard's name, and I was like, wait a second, what? So it took a second to sink in, but I was happy to be surprised. Terrell Bernard going to the Buffalo Bills. They've got Von Miller. They've got Ed Oliver up on the front of their line, and they got a two-linebacker system. So it's very interesting that he was a guy, and I didn't see this a whole lot, but he was a guy who pretty much immediately there was a lot of on the part of the team that drafted him in their media and fan bases because of the fact that they're more of a two-linebacker system, and there's not a starting spot right now. So maybe that's a good thing, but I guess, being a relatively high pick in the third round, maybe people expected them to, draft a starter or something. That's not going to be the case with Terrell, but it does give him time to kind of find his way. And again, like JT, he'll be surrounded by some pretty great players on defense.
Yeah, and that two-linebacker system is going to fit Terrell perfectly, though. And I think that might have been a huge reason why they did end up drafting him. It is earlier than I expected. By far. I think he was one of the guys who I think a lot of people just had kind of falling down their boards and ends up in a third-round pick. That's awesome. It gives Baylor the most top three-round picks in program history. It ties that record, which is really cool. And Terrell, I think this is a great fit again because he's going to a good team, and it's a team that's trying to get an identity on the defensive side. They have the offensive identity, but they need to instill a culture on the defense. And I think Terrell's going to go in there and be able to do that. Whether he gets to play early or not, we'll see. I know he's not projected to be the starter by any means, but he could be a primary backup and actually get some playing time this year. So, again, I'm just happy he went so early because when you get that kind of draft capital, spin on you, there's a much greater opportunity for you to stay in the league a lot longer.
Well, I will agree with a lot of what you said there. I will disagree slightly on one thing. I mean, the Bills do have a pretty good defense. I think people forget the Chiefs game or think of the Chiefs game and go, "Oh, well, that's Buffalo. They're not able to stop anybody." But they're top 4 total defense last year, number 1 in some categories. So I think maybe the opinion gets skewed because of that Chiefs game, and how wild and crazy that was. You're like, oh, they got Josh Allen and they can score, but they can't stop anybody. You know what I mean? But
yeah, I think they also kind of looked at that Patriots game earlier in the year where they got ran over and decided like, hey, we just lost to a team that threw for 9 yards. Maybe we need to figure out a way to get more physical. And they're a good team. Don't get me wrong, but everyone can improve, right? And so maybe that was an area they were like, hey, we need to get a little more physical for these games, maybe later on, especially when you're playing in the snow like they do very often.
Yeah, well, he should be a nice piece. They got good offense with Josh Allen, Stephon Diggs, and they've got a pretty stinking good defense, but they just have had a couple of games that were costly where maybe they didn't perform up to task, but they're good, and Terrell's going to have to work to find playing time. That's another defensive-minded group that has a pretty sturdy head coach, and I think will be very beneficial, unlike, some of these guys who were getting drafted 5 or 6 years ago who were going to just teams who had no direction, no postseason hopes. That was a little bit of a difference with this year's group. 2 more to go, almost done, but it was that kind of weekend where this was record-breaking. Treston Ebner, round 6, had to wait pretty long after Terrell Bernard was picked. 3 rounds to hear Treston Ebner's name finally called to the Chicago Bears. They're not a very good team, but they need help, and Treston Ebner can provide that, and they're trying to figure out if Justin Fields is their quarterback or not, and so Treston, I think, will be a good outlet for him, as I mentioned in my article. But, not high expectations here, that's for sure.
No, but I think with him, it's a great fit again because he's going to be able to contribute on special teams immediately, I think, for the Bears. And then you kind of move on from that and you go, okay, they got two running backs who are really good first and second down guys, but, he could slide into that third down role. And I know Tariq Cohen was kind of supposed to fit in that role, and he's no longer there. So now it looks like it could be Ebner's role if he's able to go in there and run away with it. I think people forget, he had 1,500 yards and 11 touchdowns receiving, just really crazy numbers for a running back. And I think he fits in really nicely, gives them an offensive weapon. And because they don't have a ton of talent on the roster offensively, it gives him a great shot at actually having an opportunity to play early in his career.
Yeah, I think it's a good landing spot. It's not a very good team, but again, that might be beneficial for him. So awesome to see Treston go off the board. At that point, you kind of wondered if anybody else was going to go. You figured, at least one guy probably. They weren't going to get, 4 guys in the first or 2 days and then not get anybody on day 3. But Terrell goes off the board. Treston goes off the board. At first on day 2, and then later on day 2, just 2 picks on that final day. Caylen Barnes reunites with Matt Rule and Phil Snow and Evan Cooper and all those guys in Carolina. Round 7, pick 242. You thought that, and a lot of people thought that the NFL Combine, just the pure athleticism that was confirmed, not that it was news to anybody that he was fast. If anybody just was learning that Caylen Barnes was fast at the Combine, then they did absolutely no research on him. That was basically the one thing people did know about him. What they questioned was pretty much everything else. And, I think that's what came into play here was the speed was great, but there's also a lot of other questions about just his development and where he is. So I don't think you could have asked for a better situation. I mean, drafted higher, sure, but going to Carolina where those guys know him in and out and know what his capabilities are, but also kind of know his mindset and things of that nature, I think that should be beneficial. And, they're not going to throw him to the wolves and put him on an island by himself. He'll have some time to develop. Just hopefully he gets a bit of time to develop because, there is a little bit of pressure building there in Carolina right now. So he gets to go join up with Bravion Roy and Sam Tecklenburg and those guys as well for the time being. And good for Caylen to hear his name called.
Yeah, and this is kind of where you and I thought he was going to go initially in the draft process. I think we were like, okay, probably round 6 or 7 or undrafted is kind of where we were at. And then as time progressed after the Combine and stuff in Pro Day, people were kind of talking about him as like a riser, and that didn't happen. So he falls to round 7, like you said. I mean, Carolina, they know who he is. They know what he can turn into. They know him better than anyone else. So why not go there and give yourself an opportunity in that defense? And with Phil Snow, those guys. I think it'll be a nice fit for him just to kind of figure it out in the league with guys he's comfortable with.
Yeah, I thought maybe somebody, you look at some of the guys getting drafted in like the last couple of rounds, and it's like, come on, dude. Yeah. Like guard from North Dakota Central, and you're like, he's playing like JUCO ball on his film, and you're like, come on. So yeah, there's thoughts that, okay, would I rather have this guy who doesn't even look athletic and played against like basically lower level high school competition, or do I want the kid who can run the 4.2? You know what I mean? And that's where I think some of the thinking was coming in on Caylen is like, yeah, he's rough, underdeveloped a little bit, but you can't like work hard and get as fast as he is. Like you can work as hard as you want. You're never going to be as fast as Caylen Barnes. And so I thought maybe somebody, and then some of the other draft analysts' thoughts were, that might tempt somebody to get him, in the 6th round or something like that. But regardless, he goes in the 7th. Didn't know if he was going to get picked or not at that point, and so it was cool to see his name come off the board and to Carolina as well. And then I waited with bated breath to hear one more name called, and it was not. That was it. 6 picks for Baylor's NFL draft in 2021, and there was a big shocker that didn't go and get drafted, and that was Abram Smith when all was said and done. So he didn't get drafted, but he did kick off the undrafted free agent party as there was, 5 more players that were all able to sign deals. But Abram was obviously the most high-profile one. 10 minutes after the draft was over, ink was already drying basically on his agreement with the New Orleans Saints as an undrafted free agent. And as we learned, various reports out there, Abram getting a very nice payday for signing undrafted, $222,000 guaranteed, $207,000 guaranteed base salary, and a $15,000 signing bonus. So I would imagine that was a nice little boost to the Smith family's finances, and will be to come. And I think he's got a chance to find some playing time there.
Yeah, I do as well. I actually think this is one of those situations where you kind of prefer not getting drafted. And that's just the facts.
I think Caylen and Treston have bragging rights, but I would rather be the bank account of Abram Smith.
Right, exactly. And I mean, Ebner's landing spot is fine, but it's not like the Saints. I mean, you look at the Saints, Alvin Kamara might not even be able to play at the beginning of the year due to his legal situation. We'll see what happens there. And then Abram Smith might be the second running back on the depth chart. I mean, that's realistic. I think Tony Jones is the other running back there who I think Abram's going to beat out immediately. And then you have Mark Ingram, and that's it. I mean, it's a great situation. I think he's going to make that roster, and I think of all the landing spots, this is one of the better ones. A team that really wants to run the ball, a team that he fits their scheme as that power back next to Alvin Kamara potentially at some point. And I think he wasn't drafted probably because of the injury history. He does have a lengthy injury history during his time at Baylor, so that was probably a big reason for it. But overall, great landing spot, great money. Congrats to Abram Smith. I think he's got a great opportunity to make that team and make an impact.
Yeah, I definitely think he's got a chance to do a little something with this opportunity, and it is a good team, although Sean Payton no longer there, obviously. But he'll be playing with Jameis Winston and possibly Alvin Kamara, possibly Mark Ingram. We'll see. But it is a team that's got an identity and has some solid foundation. So then there was Xavier Newman-Johnson. He goes to the Tennessee Titans, just kind of rifling through the rest of these. Great for X. This didn't take long either, and I'm happy for him that he got this opportunity.
Yeah, a good run blocking spot for sure. You get to block for Derrick Henry. I think it's just great for him to sign one of these deals. And the Titans, not a bad spot, not a bad landing spot.
Raleigh Tejada, I think at this point all were surprises, honestly. I didn't think 11 guys were going to end up signing NFL deals, but they do bloat the rosters tremendously. So there's a lot of guys signed, and that's why we all need to celebrate this right now, because over the course of the next several weeks, guys will get cut, and hopefully it's not a lot of Baylor guys, but the rosters are bloated, and over the next 3 months or so, it's going to get whittled down tremendously. So this is when the work begins, but you got to have the opportunity. And so for these three guys, I was just thrilled to see them get opportunities. Raleigh Tejada with the Packers, Jaron McVay with the LA Rams, and then Drew Estrada was kind of a straggler. It's like the last one in the door, thought it was all over, and then all of a sudden, boom, here's Drew Estrada signing a deal with the Houston Texans. So yeah, Tejada Packers, McVay Rams, and Estrada Texans. So he'll be there with Jalen Pitre. But cool to see that for these guys. I mean, there wasn't a lot of talk about them during the draft process, maybe things here and there. But I also found it interesting that Baylor's I think they had 13 guys at Pro Day. 11 of them ended up on rosters. The only two were Giancarlo Valentine and
John Lovett.
John Lovett's on a roster.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
so
he signed with I forget right now, but he's on a roster. But there was one other player now Zeke Brown. He was the other one. It was Zeke Brown and Giancarlo Valentine were the only two that did not end up on a roster. And that's not to single them out, obviously. Yeah. It's actually bragging that there's only two guys out of a group of about 14 that did not end up getting picked up. But yeah, man, those last three, your thoughts on them?
Yeah, Tejada, I mean, honestly, all three are great landing spots here. Really happy for Raleigh Tejada. I know it was a tough final season at Baylor, but he's a very good athlete, showed that at Pro Day. He's done some really nice things in his career at Baylor, and is a guy who you go to the Packers and you go, the Packers don't have a lot of depth at cornerback, so maybe he makes a push to be on that roster at some point. Jaron McVay, the Rams, I think it's just cool to go to a culture that just won a Super Bowl. That's a lot of fun. It's going to be tough for him to make the roster, I feel like, but we know hard worker, guy who's going to work his tail off, bring in a culture, great speed. So who knows? Maybe he continues to excel and overachieve and just be a guy who ends up making a roster. We'll see there. Drew Estrada with the Texans. Again, Texans, not a lot of wide receiving weapons. So maybe at some point he's able to make an impact as well, even though he got injured on pro day, wasn't able to show everything that he has in his arsenal, but a very good player during his time at Baylor. And so we'll see. I'm just happy for everyone and happy for all these guys that they were able to get an opportunity at the next level.
Yeah, pretty cool, man. I mean, 6 draft picks, again, a record because Rico Gathers did not play football. So that is a new record for the football program. And then 5 undrafted, so 11 guys. And, yeah, John Lovett went to the Carolina Panthers. So, yeah. That makes a lot of sense. But, yeah, that's awesome. And so basically all of Pro Day got picked up. Even the player who wasn't even on the team anymore, who came back for Pro Day, got picked up as well, and John Lovett. So incredible weekend for Baylor. A lot of bragging rights, a lot of graphics they can post from this. Second most in the entire Big 12. Oklahoma had a late, like second day and third day runs to end up with a couple more picks overall. But I'll take Baylor's class over their class. They had a couple second rounders, couple third rounders, and they were better at the top than the Sooners class was in my mind. But also, contributing heavily to the mark for the new Big 12 along with Cincinnati and Houston, showing what having this new Big 12 may look like in the NFL draft. Sure, you've got extra teams, but guess what? You've been playing without the number of teams that everybody else has had this entire time. So for like the last 4 or 5 years, we've been talking about, well, the Big 10 had this many and the SEC, they've had 4 more teams the entire time. So good for the Big 12 to kind of get back to equal numbers, and it translates to, guess what? Being like the third best conference when it comes to draft picks, well over the Pac-12 and even the ACC. So good stuff there. And how do you think this translates in terms of just the program using this, recruiting? Clearly, they're not the only ones using this for recruiting purposes, but how do you think this works for Baylor?
Yeah, it's definitely speaks to the development. It speaks to kind of what this program is all about, what they've been able to build with Dave Aranda, what they're continuing to try to build. And I mean, these guys had a ton of production at Baylor, and almost all of it came when Dave Aranda was the head coach. And I think that speaks volumes.
No, it happened 5 years ago, Grayson. Come on.
It speaks to what he's built and his development, and Vic Valoria getting these guys ready for the season. And, when you look around at the guys that were drafted, they had great careers at Baylor, and they were great people as well. And I think that's really important, that person over player aspect. And I think that was a big reason why these guys got drafted. Like I said, I think Baylor's culture has changed a lot in the minds of the NFL. And I think you saw that on full display with the NFL draft. And I think for recruiting purposes, recruits are definitely going to see this and see that, hey, you know what? Baylor is a place that can get me to the NFL. And on the flip side of that, Texas had 0 draft picks, 0. And I think that speaks volumes to where the two programs are at. Now that will change next year for sure, but I'm just saying for this specific class, I think it is a huge deal that Baylor can sell. We can get you to the NFL. We can develop you into a player that NFL GMs love and want on their rosters.
Yep, so there's a recap, and we'll see if anybody else lands with the USFL or the XFL ultimately. And obviously these guys have a long way in front of them. It's cutthroat business, man. And you've already seen, guys who are just watching the draft who are already on teams this past weekend already getting cut from their rosters. Like I saw former A&M lineman Kingsley Kiki was cut yesterday. So it's like, all these new guys come in, and it's not like they build a bunch more rooms and just keep expanding. Like the house stays the same size. And so there's going to be guys in and out until they settle in that 53. But it's all about the opportunity here. And I think for especially the guys in the second and third round, they've got some tremendous opportunities with some really good teams. So awesome stuff, and hopefully it keeps going. I think next year we'll see, a few more guys getting drafted. Maybe not 6, but there should be a handful, close to it. One would think if everything goes the way that it should be expected to. So elsewhere, outside of the draft, which has been like weeks in the making now at this point, now that has come and gone, another big football note from last week, although it seems like it was about 2 months ago at this stage, but Baylor did make their decision on The quarterback position, Blake Shapen is QB1. Gary Bohannon is in the transfer portal. And behind Blake Shapen, who we'll now refer to as QB1 on occasion, you've got obviously Kyron Drones, who now by default's the second-string quarterback, and you've got C.J. Rogers. And so they've got 2 scholarship quarterbacks at the moment with Gary's departure. So, I mean, I'm sure we'll have questions and stuff at some point, or certainly over the summer about, like, the depth and all of that. But let's just stick with the decision for Blake by the coaches, and then Gary's, I guess, leap into the transfer portal.
Yeah, I mean, it speaks volumes about this Baylor coaching staff. You know, the best players are going to play, and it doesn't matter what age you are. It doesn't matter how long the other guy's been playing. The guy that's going to give them the best chance to win games, that's going to be the guy, and it was Blake Shapen. And I think that this was the right decision. I think that if you do, go back and look at kind of how explosive they were when Shapen was the quarterback, this makes a ton of sense. And I think this is going to allow Baylor to kind of push that next ceiling and try to get into the college football playoff and raise that ceiling to the point where, hey, they feel like they can go into a college football playoff and actually win games as well with him. And I think this offense will look more like the BYU offense did when Jeff Grimes was there with Zach Wilson at the helm. I think that Shapen can make those kind of throws and expand this offense significantly. And while I love Gary and love what he did for the program, and I think Gary's a fine quarterback, he does not have the upside that Shapen does. Now, on the flip side, Shapen's about 195 pounds, and they have 2 backup quarterbacks, with one of them being a walk-on. And they're very young, very inexperienced behind him, and they're going to have to figure out a way to get those guys developed quickly because it's really, really tough to imagine Shapen being able to stay completely healthy throughout an entire season. That just simply has not really been the case very much for Baylor in general at the quarterback position. So hopefully he's able to, but on the flip side, Sean Bell and Jeff Grimes have to get those younger guys ready to go and make sure that if something does happen to Shapen, they have a guy that can come in and be reliable for them. So yeah, I mean, it's a massive decision, one that I think the staff knew when they made this decision. Gary was going to go to the transfer portal, and their depth was going to be hurt immensely, which just, again, speaks volumes to the staff because they did it right before the transfer portal deadline. I mean, kudos to them. That couldn't have been an easy decision because they could have just dragged it out throughout the fall.
Yeah, and I got to say, I saw a lot of different, and I don't care too much about, reaction or all of that. I mean, we welcome it, but I don't go seeking it out with every decision that's made and drown in it, basically. But, I do want to take like a little bit of the pulse, and I think most people were happy with, the decision. Bummed for Gary, who I think was the majority opinion. Everybody was, sad for him, but I just, like, I have to tell myself this sometimes. I have to remind myself, there's just some dumb people in the world. And so I immediately saw, and this was like 1 out of the 100, like, congrats, Blake, and all sad for Gary. But there were some people upset, obviously, because I guess Gary's their guy. And hell, it might have been a family member from a different account. That's the other kind of, annoying part about Twitter is the anonymity of it. But, how dare you? I mean, he's earned his spot. Well, no, he clearly didn't. I mean, I'm sorry, but this was a wide-open spring quarterback competition, and if your reasoning why you're upset about it is because Gary had already earned the starting spot or Gary was the de facto starter, no, that's not how it works, and at least that's not how it works at Baylor. It was an open quarterback competition this spring. There was no shortage of articles written about that, no shortage of conversations, and Blake won the competition. And to me, I'm not surprised. If I thought that Blake wasn't as good as Gary or as capable of being as good as Gary, then I would say, like, man, I don't know about this. But as soon as it was announced, it's like, okay, cool, boom, let's go. And you know what? If Gary had been named quarterback, okay, cool, boom, let's go. So either way, some guy's jumping in the portal. Either way, one side's going to be upset. But you don't just de facto get to remain the starter simply because you're the oldest or you've been around the longest or because you used to be at one point in time. That's not how it works.
Well, and you also have to remember there's a reason that they didn't decide to name him the starter going into spring football. You know what I mean? Like, he was the starter last year.
Who was going to start the Sugar Bowl if Blake was healthy? That's why it annoys me that we never got to see that.
I know. Yeah.
And that's why the whole time when we didn't get to see that, if you remember, I kept mentioning, like, man, I wish we could have seen that because it would have been interesting to see what decision would have been made. But anyways.
It would have been Shapen because, well, according to everyone, Gary wasn't 100%. So it would have been Shapen. Yeah. So that would have been the convenient excuse.
But all things equal.
You're right. That's a great question. So I don't know. I think that at this point, though, this is the right decision. And this is the decision that had to be made. I think Shapen is their future right now at quarterback, and they're going to have to build around him. And I think he gives them more options offensively, especially in the passing game. So, yes, I feel bad for Gary as well, but you have to remember he wasn't promised the job going into spring. There's a reason. They literally kept saying it's an open quarterback competition, much like the year before, even though Gary was the starter throughout the year. Most teams, if you have a guy that you think is so cerebral, they would have just said, no, he's our guy. Like he's our starting quarterback. They didn't do that. And so left the door open for Shapen. Shapen flat out outplayed him in a major way in the spring game. And here you go. Blake Shapen's the guy. Gary's moving on. I know he took a visit to Missouri. He's probably going to take a couple other visits. I'm very curious where he ends up. And I wish him nothing but the best. I hope he plays great wherever he does end up. I hope he goes to a place where he can start immediately as well. And he still has 2 more years. So I'm excited. He's still got this year and next year. So I'm excited for him, and I think he's going to do some great things. But on the flip side, it does hurt Baylor depth-wise if Gary is not on the roster, just because they're so young and inexperienced in general, not just behind Shapen. In general, they're young and inexperienced. So, they're going to have to get those guys ready very quickly and hopefully have an offense ready for each of them if something does happen to Shapen.
Yeah, I mean, if Shapen goes down, then all hell's breaking loose. That is the concern. And we saw, like, the end of the Browse years when they were just playing with fire as far as quarterback depth, and none of it was not necessarily in their control. But I'm not saying this is like Lynx Hawthorne level, but, man, you're like a couple plays from it being that, actually. So that's really a little bit of a concern.
Yeah, and this is what happens when you put all your eggs in one basket, which they did with Austin Novosad. You know, they decided we're not going to take a 2022 quarterback. We're just going to focus on 2023, and they didn't take one. And this is also the reason they took C.J. Rodgers and said so many great things about him. Well, now he's got to step up to the plate and prove that he can be that third or second quarterback on this roster and give them truly 3 quarterbacks they feel comfortable about. So we'll see what happens. I think their future is still bright at the position because I do like Drones and Rodgers, and I love Novosad. I think he's going to be fantastic as well. And now you got Shapen at the helm, which is very good, I think. I think he's going to be very, very good for Baylor.
Yeah, good luck to Gary. Appreciate him for all he did over the years. But, I mean, it's just reality is, somebody's got to win the job, somebody's got to lose the job, and then, it's a coin flip on whether or not that person who doesn't win it decides to go in the transfer portal. And so in this case, it's Gary Bohannon, and maybe he ends up at Missouri or wherever else. But good luck to him, and thanks for the memories. But I do think that ultimately it's a good move for Baylor. I felt good about it either way, honestly. So, I mean, I was cool with whatever decision we were going to hear about. But there is something that, is very interesting about the Shapen choice, because Gary would have been the easy thing to do. It would have been easy to just say, yeah, we'll just roll with what we've got, not disrupt anything, not piss anybody off, and just, go with what's easy. And they didn't do that. And so I can appreciate that.
I think that point is massive. Like, Shapen wasn't given this job. Shapen won this job and was clearly significantly better than Gary. You know what I mean? Like, that's my read on this, is that he didn't just win this narrowly. Like, I don't think you make that change if they're really, really close. I think this was literally, Shapen's just better. And I think that speaks volumes to maybe his potential and his ceiling as well. I think that's something people should definitely read into.
Yep. So very interesting to have that wind down and become official. And they did not waste much time at all. I thought it would be a few more days before we heard anything. And I was surprised by the end that Blake was named. That wasn't surprising, but it did feel like it was Gary's to lose the entire time, just with what was being said and all that. I mean, it would have been easy, like I said, to just continue with what they were going with. But they go with Blake, and now we'll see how this plays out. But I think it's going to be fun to watch him play. All right, elsewhere, before we get in the mailbag, men's tennis.
One basketball note before we get to men's tennis. I mentioned this was just a tweet that happened, I think, yesterday, but Matthew Meyer has essentially, if he does not go to the NFL draft, he will enter the transfer portal.
I mean the NBA draft.
NBA draft. Sorry. My mind's all on the NFL right now. But yes, the NBA draft, he will enter the transfer portal. That's according to Jonathan Givony yesterday. So I think that's big news, though, because it's something we've talked about a lot. We feel like there's one spot available. That spot is pretty much for Adam Flagler. So yeah, if Matthew Meyer does not go to the NBA draft, then it does look like he'll be looking at options in the transfer portal.
Yeah, I mean, there's no room. There's no room for him at Baylor. And, we kind of, I think on the show maybe referred to this. Yeah, I mean, he, good luck to him. Great Bear and all that. But, yeah, it got to a point where you saw with the recruiting here recently, they were restocking and weren't going to sit here and wait and, play the whole game and do all of that. I mean, they will with Adam Flagler. But I think with Matthew Meyer, it's just like, all right, we're going to go ahead and move on. And, good luck to you and all of that. That's just kind of my read on the situation. So, yeah, good luck. I mean, that's his only options. It's either stay pro or pretty much get in the transfer portal, honestly. So good luck to him and good to have some official word on that. So elsewhere, men's tennis gets their national seeding for the postseason tournament. Grayson, know that you've been all over that. And the Bears going to go try and play for a national championship.
Yeah, I'm really excited about this. This is going to be a lot of fun. They have an opportunity to win a national championship again. They just continue to be so competitive every year, but now let's see it in the postseason. Let's see a national championship, right? Not get to be the runner-up, go and win the whole thing. And I think if you look at their draw, they got Abilene Christian the first round, then they'll face the winner of Tulsa and Texas A&M. I expect that to be Texas A&M, and I expect Baylor to win that fairly easily, and that would get them to the Sweet 16, I guess. And if you look at their region, I don't think they're really going to be tested until they get to Tennessee. Tennessee's where they're the number 6 team in the country. They beat Baylor earlier in the year. So I think that would be a major challenge. But again, I think Baylor's a different team than they were early in the season. So I feel like Baylor can definitely make a run here, get to the Final Four, and then, of course, as a 3 seed in the Final Four, you're going to get tested in every which way. So I think they're going to make a run here. I think they're going to get to a Final Four, and from there, we're going to have to talk about it in later weeks when I can really preview their actual matchups. But I will say after this first weekend, I think they're going to get out of the first weekend unscathed.
Well, it'd be awesome to see them go on a run. Man, if somebody could win a national title, that'd be pretty incredible. But regardless, they're sitting in a good spot as men's tennis gets it all underway. And there's a lot of spring sports doing that right now. You got A&T just having won their 7th consecutive NCATA national championship. A lot of other sports are kind of quiet at the moment, but you got tennis, you got women Big 12 golf coming up. So
you got Baylor baseball.
I'm going to get to them in a second. Yeah, I'll let you handle most of that. But yeah, it's just fun to kind of see the spring sports winding down. We're going to be begging for them here in about a month and a half or so. But I mean, it's a very active weekend, especially with the NFL draft going on. But yeah, now men's tennis is going to be trying to play for a championship, so that'll be cool to see. Women's tennis in the tournament as well. They're a 26 seed, I believe, or they're number 26 team, excuse me. But they've punched their ticket as well. So we'll kind of recap and do all that with those sports over the next few weeks as that sort of plays itself out. But yeah, on the rest of the sports, spring-wise, you've got baseball. They won their series finale this past weekend, dropped the series, but did get a win to avoid being swept by Texas Tech. So what do you have to say about baseball? Yeah, because I'll be honest with you, I don't have a lot to say at the moment.
An improvement after getting beaten, outscored 46-9 against Texas in a 3-game series. They were able to regroup and only gave up 24 runs this weekend to Texas Tech. Any improvement's good improvement. Winning a game against Tech is, that's nice, right? I mean, it's something.
Man, we were really polishing this turd, ain't we?
Hey, but I will tell you, they're 22-22, so they're 500 right now. Postseason chances come down to this: they have to win out, and that's not going to happen.
They have to win out. Okay.
Have to win out. in the regular season, if they want any hope of making the postseason. And then if they lose any game in the regular season left, which includes a matchup against Oklahoma State, who just swept Texas, then they have to win the Big 12 tournament to make the postseason. And currently right now, they are not a lock for the Big 12 tournament yet, because Kansas is still...
They're close.
They're close. They're not yet,
But Kansas is like at 2 wins in Big 12 play, like a couple wins away, basically.
And Kansas State is who they play next. So if K-State sweeps Baylor, that things could get a little interesting in that regard. Overall, I mean, Baylor's, it would take a miracle for them to make the postseason. I mean, it just is what it is. This season's been extremely disappointing. And I'm just hoping they just play competitive, just come out, beat Kansas State, like show a little bit of life. But that might be a little bit too much to ask at this point. I don't know what the direction of this team's going to be going forward. I don't know if Coach Rod is going to be the coach there still. I don't. And I feel like looking at this program and looking at how things have trended, it just feels like it might be time to move in a different direction. And the same thing we keep saying every year is this team just does not finish well in their seasons. They just don't finish. And, injuries happen. Well, injuries are a part of your training staff and are a part of, coaching. You got to be able to bring in guys that keep your guys healthy. They haven't been able to do that. And at the end of the year, it just feels like they don't play their best baseball at the end. And that's a problem. And that's been a problem with Coach Rod. And it makes me sad because Coach Rod is such a great guy, a great human being. And this program looked like the trajectory was trending in such a great direction in 2019. It felt like there was a huge ceiling there that they could really make that next step. I don't know that I see that anymore.
Yeah, I make a little crack there, but I'm not trying to, by any means, like make fun of, Rodriguez or the team or anything like that. But yeah, they're just, it's just not, there's nothing to talk about. It's just losses and injuries basically each weekend. And I don't mean there's nothing to talk about. Like I see all the talk on the boards and stuff for, like Crash and those, people that follow baseball very closely. But, I'm a big baseball fan, but there's nothing jazzing me up about it. There's just there's a juice missing. I think that's fair to say. And when you look around at a lot of other programs, and I know it's unfair for like every program to be held at like this super high standard of like everybody's winning championships, and like if you don't do that, you're on the outside looking in. It's not like that, but be competitive, like fight. And I know that they've tried to compete and fight, and then things get in the way and stuff. But like it's just kind of listless is a way to describe it.
Well, West Virginia should not be better than you. That's the school that I look at and go, how are they? They're 9-6 in conference, 26-16. They're going to make postseason. Oklahoma has some history, but West Virginia is the one that I'm just like, what is going on? Baylor's 5-13 in the Big 12. Kansas State's 4-11, and then Kansas is 3-12. So it's close. They only have two games of cushion right now from Kansas, and so it's going to be a battle to try to make the Big 12 tournament. And it really this weekend is massive because K-State is 4-11. So if you can win two of these games, then you're pretty much a lock.
Yeah, they should make the Big 12 tournament. If they don't make the Big 12 tournament, then that's really going off the rails, in my opinion. But we'll see what they do. Again, not trying to, beat down on an already beaten down group, but there's just a lack of oomph there that's noticeable. And when you look around the rest of the country and you see how many people are enjoying baseball season just in the Big 12 alone, it's like packed crowds in Austin and Lubbock and Stillwater and Fort Worth, and everybody's kind of where they were just even a couple of years ago or better. And I feel like Baylor has regressed. I don't think there's any denying that. And for whatever reasons those are, I'm not rooting for a change necessarily at all. If it was football, I'd have a much stronger opinion. I'll be honest with you about it, but we'll see what happens there. But so I guess listless is the word I keep coming back to. There's not a lot of oomph with that program right now, and there's a lot of oomph around pretty much every other program. So how you change that and correct that, I'll leave that up to Mac Rhodes. But what do you think? Time to get in the mailbag now?
Yeah,
all right.
do it.
Alpha Needle, over under 7, the number of Bears drafted in 2023.
All right, so let's do this really quickly. I thought about it, and I said under, but then I looked at the roster a little bit deeper.
Let me tell you, I looked at this. There's going to be like 20 dudes at Pro Day next year if it all stays equal.
So here are my early predictions. Ben Sims, Squirrel, Connor Galvin, Khalil Keith, Jackson Player, Gabe Hall, and that gets you to 6. And I'm trying to think if there's anyone I'm missing. I think those are the main. I mean, TJ Franklin could get drafted as well if he leaves early. Maybe a Grant Miller sneaks in there as well, but that's kind of my guy. So it's like right on that number. I'm going to go with over. I'll just say, they're going to turn someone else into an NFL guy. I'll go with over.
I haven't even thought about this at all. I'm not picking Craig Williams to be a draft pick, though.
Okay.
His size is, I don't see it. But Connor Galvin, I think will get drafted. Ben Sims, I think will get drafted. Dylan Doyle, I think will get drafted. Doyle. Al Walcott, I think will probably get drafted.
Khalil Keith.
And Khalil Keith. So there's 5 that I feel pretty strongly about. And then, any number of guys. Literally, here's a list that I started writing the other day.
Did we say Ika?
No, because he's a junior next year.
I think he'll...
Yeah, we can wait for him to make that decision because we could do that with a lot of guys.
Squirrel's in that group as well, but I think that they'll both get drafted. I think they will.
Okay. Well, let's just go with seniors because we can do the whole dance on underclassmen. But you got Galvin, Gall, Keith, Miller, Jeffrey, Sims, Franklin, Maxwell, Obaniah, Player, Doyle, Jackson, Walcott, Milton, Morgan, Jackson, Power. Those are, I said Jackson twice, but those are all just like seniors who have contributed or, and I don't think like Chidi Obaniah is a big lock to get picked by any means like that. But I'm just saying, I was looking at a pro day next year, what that could look like. And that's 17 guys. And I'm not even looking at all of them, or am I looking at underclassmen? So, point being, they're going to have a massive, showing potentially next year. Whether that translates into a bunch of picks, I don't know. But the ones I rattled off a second ago, and then even a TJ Franklin, if you want to throw him in there, maybe later rounds. I think they could match 6. But to your question, over under 7, I'll say under in terms of drafted. And you said what?
I'm going over.
Okay.
I'm going 7 or over. So I get 7 as a push, I guess.
Joel Clatt Groupie, call your shots. Assuming we now sit at 85, including incoming enrollees, how many scholars, if any, get freed up in May through June because of retirements? And how does Aranda use them? Does he take portal guys, scholarship to Josh Cameron, for example? How does he do that?
Yeah, I think they'll end up with maybe 3. 3, I think, could be the number that I'm looking at. It all depends on how many they actually get freed up. So he's telling me to call my shot. So I'll say 3. I think they take at least one guy from the portal, probably a wide receiver. I think they put Josh Cameron on scholarship. And then I almost think I would like for them to take a defensive lineman they feel like they could mold for the future, or a running back for next year. But I almost feel like they're getting to a point where they might, depending on how they view CJ Rogers, there might be an option that they have to put him on scholarship just because they have so little depth there. So he might be another option, but I think they're going to focus on this year. So if they have 3 available, I think they take a transfer wide receiver, put Josh Cameron on scholarship, and then take a transfer, whether it's a safety or a defensive lineman. So 2 transfers and then Josh Cameron.
Thank you, Joel. Scotty B. Baylor King, top 5 quarterbacks in the Big 12 for next year, in your opinion, given that Blake Shapen is a starter for Baylor officially?
It's a good question. I think Spencer Sanders is in that group. I think Shapen is in that group. I think that Dylan Gabriel will be in that group. I think he'll start at Oklahoma.
JT Daniels?
Yeah, that's one where I'm... see, that's the other part. I think whoever the quarterback is at TCU will be in that group, and I think it'll be Chandler Morris, but it could be Max Duggan. I think JT Daniels.
So it's kind of hard to even do this because we don't even know who's the starter.
But I do think those 3 are pretty locked in. I think those 3, and then Quinn Ewers, 4, and then whoever the 5th one. I'll just go off of I'll go with Chandler Morris just based on what I saw. So those are my top 5.
I swear you just named like 7 dudes. Who did you just name?
No, so the 4 that I got up there, no doubt in my mind, are Spencer Sanders, Blake Shapen, Dylan Gabriel, Quinn Ewers. And then the 5th one I'm struggling with, but I'm going to go with Chandler Morris.
Okay. I'll go, and I have not looked at this at all. I mean, let's just go Shapen, Gabriel, JT Daniels. I can't even think of him in my head right now.
Ewers.
Yeah, but like it's only if he was at West Virginia, we would not prop him up. You know what I mean? Like he would not even get mentioned if he was at West Virginia. But man, we put him in like automatic top 5s because he's at Texas and because he was a high profile recruit.
I mean, we did that with JT Daniels too.
Yeah, but I mean,
done a lot.
Dude, he played at the national championship Georgia 2 years ago. He's done more than any freaking quarterback in the Big 12 so far. I mean, more than Dylan Gabriel or more than Quinn Ewers or more than Blake Shapen or more than
Blake Shapen won a Big 12 championship.
Okay, yeah, you're right.
He won a game that mattered. JT
You're right.
sat on the bench and watched another guy win the championship.
All right, man. There's a lot of JT Daniels revisionist history going on, man. Here,
I mean,
he started
yeah.
at Georgia, Grayson. He started at the #1 team in the country. So, I mean, I agree with you. I don't think he's just by default the best quarterback, but like, he's not some schlub.
No, he's not.
Yeah.
He's not. And he's right there for me in my top, right there.
And
on
that's
the verge
my
of top
point
5.
is that, but like, we're questioning him, but Quinn Ewers, automatic ding. He's just on there. Dylan Gabriel's like questionable injury history. Ding. He's automatically on there. Who's he play for? Oklahoma. If he played at West Virginia, we wouldn't mention him. That's my point.
I think the Ewers thing has more to do with the talent around him than necessarily just him. I think they have a lot of weapons, which helps.
Yeah. They're playing a fun game now, aren't they? Oh, yeah, you want to spend money, huh? Well, good. Save up some of that to spend on the guys that you now have to prevent from getting poached. Right. That's a fun game, isn't it? Yeah. Weird how that works out. So, I mean, I think we see ultimately the same thing here. I'm just calling out the double standard of like the nod that a guy gets because of the logo. Yeah. And, I'm just tired of seeing it. It's so blatantly obvious in some cases. And like, I think Quinn Ewers is going to be really good, but he does get defaulted into like top 5 lists on a regular basis based on nothing but his high school ranking and his NIL. But outside of that, what have you seen him do in college yet?
For sure.
Nothing.
Which I think is fascinating because we didn't even mention a guy who's actually probably a great fit for the offense he's going to is Adrian Martinez.
Yes, because I can't think of him right now.
I know, but like we're not even like mentioning him, even though I think he could be very solid because he's a veteran, goes to a great spot. So, yeah, there's a lot of really good quarterbacks. But I think the top 4 for me are pretty locked in. Just because of landing spot.
Tech is going to have, maybe Shuck is pretty good, or Baron Morton or whatever. And so we don't even know who half the quarterbacks are just yet. So it's kind of hard to answer, but you got a gist of it there. Stat Boy, what would be more surprising or impressive for Baylor football this season? Baylor wins at Iowa State, OU, and Texas Tech, or Baylor repeats as Big 12 champions, assuming Baylor does not achieve both?
More surprising and impressive is winning a Big 12 championship, is repeating for sure than just winning those 3 games. Oh yeah, I don't think Iowa State and Texas Tech are going to be world beaters next year. I think if you really wanted to make it more interesting, exchange those with winning at Texas and winning at BYU and at Oklahoma. Now that's more daunting than Iowa State and Texas Tech. I feel like Baylor should win those 2 games. The OU game, that's tough, but I think winning Big 12 champions, repeating, I think that would be more surprising and more impressive.
Yeah, I mean, winning the Big 12 title is better than winning 3 road games. That's not even a close call to me. I mean, it would be awfully impressive to win in Ames and Norman and Lubbock, but you have to do all those things to win a Big 12 title. So a Big 12 title is the most impressive. And I think that would probably, be the most surprising thing. Blantham 4, based on what you're seeing and hearing, how is Baylor doing in NIL? Are we keeping up, falling behind, or staying about in the same place relative to other schools?
I think staying in about the same place with the tier of schools that you'd expect Baylor to be around. I mean, they're not going to be a top 20 NIL school. They're not there, but they're in that, they're in the range where they can still be very competitive, get a couple guys here and there, and compete in NIL without going out and buying players. Baylor's just not going to do that. They don't believe in that.
1960. Hopefully that answers your question, Blantham. I mean, they're staying competitive, but I mean, they're not going to be getting into races with Alabama and Texas.
They're not going after Jordan Addison and
they shouldn't. They should stay 20 feet away from that that type of player. That is a culture cancer. I don't care how good of a nice young man he's going to be. If you're just joining my team because somebody gave you $4 million, then that's going to disrupt the culture.
And a house.
And whatever. Like, that's going to disrupt the culture.
Yeah.
If it's kind of the same across the board or something like that, but they could really use him. They could absolutely really use him. But yeah, I don't think that they need to start jumping in the deep end all that often. 1964 Bear, how does NIL work? Oh, no. God.
Ask the NCAA. They don't have an answer either.
I think wait for Grayson and Armstrong's spinoff podcast, all NIL all the time. Can anyone go to a college or high school player and say, if you will go to the college of my choice, I will give you money for your NIL to be installed on the item of my choice? This seems to be straight up bribery or paying to go to a particular school. Please explain how it works.
Oh, I'll explain how it works. USC just basically DM text message called Jordan Addison, the Biletnikoff Award winner.
A random coach probably or an agent, but USC didn't technically contact him, which is bull.
The best player, the best wide receiver in the nation, USC essentially bribed to leave Pittsburgh and to go to USC. So that's where we're at right now with NIL. And then Texas players are trying to get poached. Texas is doing the same thing to others. Every school basically now is under all eyes are on all of their players because schools just have no limits now. They can go in and try to send out an offer to a guy, try to be discreet about it. But yeah, it's the Wild West. So I can't even tell you how it works because I don't think the NCAA knows how it works. I don't think schools know how it works. I think it is literally the Wild West right now. And it is literally free agency. That's what it is.
Yeah, it's bonkers. And, anytime you try to raise any reservations over just the process of it, you'll get screamed at by probably a college football national reporter who they will tell you it's all because, the kids are just getting what they deserved all this time. It's because those guys are making way more money in NIL as far as the attention and all that. That's why they love it so much. Some will say, and some will be accurate and no, it's good for the players. And that's true. But people like Bud Elliott and a lot of the national people, because he was really just kind of being a D to people who were asking NIL questions the other day. And I started reading some of his answers, and this isn't an attack on him by any means, but he's just one of many people who are they'll shout you down or call you stupid if you question it at all.
Yeah.
And it's no, I think there's room to question. Nobody's questioning guys getting paid. I think everybody's on board, but there's a disingenuous way that college football people, some people are covering this, that if you raise any objection, you're somehow anti-student athlete, you're anti-players getting money, you're probably racist, all these things. And it's no, I just want there to be a rule that Jordan Addison can't just get a phone call from USC and get offered $5 million to leave his team.
While he's not in the portal.
That's all anybody wants, you morons. But you know that, and you don't want to phrase it that way because then it exposes how stupid this all is, while great for the players. And so they, no, you're saying that you don't want Jordan Addison to get paid and that Jordan Addison shouldn't belong in a free market. And Jordan Addison, no, I'm just saying that Jordan Addison shouldn't be getting contacted. That's what I'm saying. Yeah. If he's in the portal, that's one thing. So there's a lot of I don't even know. There's a lot of disingenuous arguments going on, I feel like. And there's a lot of, what is that word? Straw man arguments going on. There's a lot of that going on as well. But I think most people, they just want some set of rules to kind of reel this in to where some of this, Miami and USC in particular stuff isn't happening on a regular basis. And I think Texas fans with the whole Jade Barron thing with Oregon and now Xavier Worthy and USC, you think a few of them have changed their tune about it as well and think there probably should be some guidelines? That's all anybody wants, not players getting paid. Ryan Allen Long, now that spring football is done, when does the Bearcast get to go on vacation? This Cal Ripken streak of podcast can't go on forever. Brother, hopefully soon. I am going to need a day at some point just to break up the Tuesdays, but Yeah, we'll get that in soon.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to do a solo pod. No, I'm kidding. We will take a break. We
need to. I mean, probably at some point just for sanity.
Yeah,
you know?
we will eventually. But right now, we keep it going every single week. We've done it. We're on a very nice streak right now.
Yeah, but I'm not trying to be Cal Ripken. If the streak ends, the streak ends. At some point, and I'm not keeping track of it. But once spring sports winds down, you might see me bolt for a week or something. But thank you, Ryan. He also asked, wanted your professional opinion on this. Outkick.com interviewed a scout about Taekwon. Here's what they said. I like his tape if he was playing against the SEC competition because they actually challenge guys over there, but he played in the Big 12, and when he gets to the NFL, he'll understand it's not the Big 12 anymore. I don't know if he'll be able to get off the line of scrimmage his rookie year. And by his second year, once he learns to get off, then DBs will redirect with relative ease. What I'm saying is he will never be where Mac Jones expects him to be. Fair assessment. I feel like this is a scout who didn't watch much Big 12 football and thinks this is an all-offense league still.
Yeah, I feel like this is a scout who didn't watch the Sugar Bowl, because if Gary was healthy or if Blake Shapen was playing in that game, Taekwon was probably going to have 2 touchdowns and like 120 yards.
Why does anybody even exist outside of the SEC?
Right. What's the point? And this guy's acting like every school in the SEC is throwing out the Georgia and Bama corners. Like, dude, Vanderbilt, Kentucky, like there are schools that don't play defense, that aren't good at defense there. So that's my first problem with this comment is he lumps in the whole SEC instead of saying, okay, if he had to play Bama or Georgia, what would he have done? Okay, that's a different argument. But saying the whole SEC, that is just wild to me when, Baylor played a really tough schedule last year, including whooping up on an SEC team as well. Now, as far as his other comments, I understand what he's saying. I do think there are some areas that Taekwon's going to have to grow at the next level, especially with the redirect stuff and getting open and tight coverage. I understand all that, but the one thing he is for sure going to be able to do is take the top off the defense, and that's exactly why the Patriots drafted him. That's why he's a great fit for them, because when you're able to expand a defense vertically, it allows you to run the ball more effectively, which is exactly what they want to do with Damian Harris and Ramondre Stevenson, which makes him a very nice fit for the Patriots.
I don't know what Taekwon's success in the NFL is going to be, and I do worry a little bit about just his size and strength, but Bill Belichick picked him and moved up to get him, and that's all I need to say about that. Take any opinion from any website, Outkick or otherwise, from any random NFL scout, and fair enough to them, but Bill Belichick traded up to get him. So I feel like he can probably play a little bit, and that if he couldn't get off the line against SEC defensive backs, then maybe that's something the greatest head coach in pro football history would probably have thought of. But we'll see. Maybe this guy's right. Packard, any cursory scan of the potential 23 roster can be concerning as it relates to our possible inexperience on the D-line. I know you and I guess he's talking to you, Grayson. Yeah. I know you and Travis touched on it within the weekly chat this week, but I'd love to hear you guys go deeper about what you think Aranda will realistically be able to do to keep program momentum. Okay, I'm confused here. What are we talking about?
He's talking about the defensive line, but okay. I don't know why program momentum.
Yeah, this position is one of the hardest to recruit for smaller programs like ours, and with 2 to 3 projected to go into the NFL, that could make it. Okay, so we're talking about next year?
Yeah.
Oh, that's why I'm like inexperienced on the D-line. What are you talking about?
He's talking about like the future of the defensive line.
Gotcha. I'm thinking about next football season. So we're talking about 2023. Yeah. Okay.
Because they could lose a lot. I mean, if you look up and down the roster, there are some guys that could go. If Ika leaves, Gabe Hall, if he leaves, you lose Maxwell and Player and Cheedy. I mean, they could take a huge hit on the defensive line. Yeah, absolutely. And so it's an area they have to address in the 2023 class, and I expect them to. I think that's an area where I've talked about it kind of ad nauseum, that defensive line, cornerbacks, those are areas they really have to address. And on the defensive line, they have a lot of offers out there. You're talking about DK Kalu, Brendan Bett out of Caylen. They just offered Jaden Cofield, the Texas Tech commit as well. Samu Tom and Pepe out of Atascocita. He's another big nose tackle. So basically my whole point is they have to be able to go out and land guys in the 2023 class. They're going to have to take at least 1, maybe 2 nose tackles. They're going to have to take probably 2 guys they feel like can fit in at defensive tackle or defensive end as well. So they have a lot of work to do there in this 2023 class, which is important, but I also think they're going to have to hit the transfer portal a little bit for defensive linemen once again. And I think you put that all together, I trust Dave Aranda to be able to build that. I mean, you got to remember, they also have Devontae Tizino and Trey Emery about to enroll as well this summer. So they got options, but I will say they will have to supplement with the transfer portal, and I'm not too worried about them keeping program momentum going. I think they'll be fine.
Yeah, Matt, sorry I misunderstood your question. I was like, then D-line, I got 2023. That's what threw me off. Thanks for the question. Bear Coog, do you think tightening the one-time transfer without penalty by making players sit out a season if they decide to transfer, that's not going to happen.
Not going to happen.
They've already waived the one-time. I mean, they already had the one-time transfer rule, so I don't even need to read the rest of your question. Honestly, it's not going to happen. But do you think it will curb players from getting poached from the schools they're at? No. If this happens, do you think it's fair to the student athletes? No, but it's not going to happen. So, that's just we're definitely not going back to where we're going to start penalizing these guys all of a sudden. If anything, they just got to find walls to build around whatever it is now and keep it within that framework, I guess. Follow-up, and this is a weird perspective. Why do student-athletes who are already enrolled at the university and playing get to slide in the DMs of their best buddies across the U.S. saying they will get X, Y, Z NIL deal if they were to come to their university?
Well, they don't get to, but they're friends, so they're going to do that. I mean, you can't restrict that. I mean, you can do whatever you want. You're not supposed to, but it's going to happen. That's one of those it is what it is type things.
Why do they? Because there's no rules against it, really. I mean, that's why. And why do they? Because Lincoln Riley tells them to, so that he can get the roundabout hookup to talk to the guy without saying he really talked to the guy. And, that's why. It's all just to keep it as sleazy as possible and as backdoor as possible. Even though it's out in the wide open, they're just still keeping it behind closed doors for some reason. If it's on the up and up, I don't know why. But, I mean, why? Because there's nothing stopping it. That's the simplest answer. My perspective, that student athlete doing the contacting is representing their university. As far as I know, the university can't set up the NIL deals themselves, but that's what's happening through the student athlete. Not sure why they can't be held accountable for this, but they're held accountable when they post unacceptable things on social media or say something bad in a presser and then get kicked off the team.
But how are you going to moderate that?
Yeah, if a guy says something in a presser, he's saying that on camera, but if a guy says something in his DMs, like, how do I know that he said that in his DMs? Like, that's where the problem is.
Yeah, unless his buddy exposes him, which why would that person?
You could create a whole nother set of I mean, yeah, it's just... It's wild to wrap your head around, but it's really simple when you think about it. Like, yeah, if you're Lincoln Riley, you just get Caleb Williams to DM what great receiver you want, get him talking. Hey, $3 million in NIL, would that get you at least perk up a little bit? Oh yeah, you are interested. Hey, so and so, go tell Coach Riley. I mean, Coach so and so. And just you play dumb, and there's nothing that can be proven really. And even if it was Caleb Williams reaching out, Caleb Williams is free to do that. Now, your question, he's a part of the university. Yeah, he technically should be, but welcome to the world of no rules. Basically, that's what everybody's wringing their hands about, not the money. Like college football reporters try to keep telling you and try to keep painting that picture. It's not the money. It's all this stuff we're talking about right here. But they will tell you, oh, well, you just hate the players are getting money. No, I hate that Caleb Williams or Lincoln Riley or whatever are going and poaching guys through DMs on Twitter or Instagram. Yeah. And I'm like 99% of college football fans. But no, you still don't like people getting money. No. Don't like the chaos of it. So to answer your question, I mean, anything you want to add to that?
No. I'm sick of it already. We're about to get another NIL question. It's just like, I just hate where this has gone, and the NCAA is a complete joke they always have been, but to not have any rules in place when you just knew this was going to happen is just baffling.
That's why we got to celebrate that Baylor team last year more than probably any other ever, because that may be like the last wave of teams that we see that are actually like a team that went through adversity and stuck it out and stuck together. I was thinking about that yesterday. Because if this was the NIL world, JT Woods is getting $500,000 from Texas to join them after they go 2-7. Jalen Pitre is getting $2 million offers to go to A&M after they go 2-7. Like, that's what would have been happening. But just out in the free and clear, and there would have been no restraints to it. So,
but that's the even worse part. Pitt won like 11 games.
Yeah,
last
they're good,
year.
but his quarterback's gone now. It's all about him. It's all about him. It's all about him.
Crazy.
I didn't think about this with NIL. And I don't know. I need to. I got to go here, but I need to workshop this some more. But I feel like NIL, just the simple fact of a player earning money for their name, image, likeness. Like, totally, again, fine with that, college football national media. But to me, it seems like the NIL that we're seeing, it's basically just social media come to life. It's kind of, it's a I don't know how to explain it. It's all about just the money and the chaos and the movement and the attention and the me and the Instagram pics and all the BS that really doesn't matter. Although, money can change lives and all that. I get that. But this is why my social media, it needs work. I know. But like when you look on social media, especially like Instagram, do you see like mostly real stuff? No, you see a bunch of funhouse mirrors and people with like filters and all sorts of BS, like some car that's their neighbors, but they're acting like, and it's all about just the image, right? And I feel like there's a lot of people, and media is almost encouraging this, of money's all that matters and just money, 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 money. And then, all those priceless life lessons that some of these Baylor players learned over the years about adversity and sacrifice and teammates and love and all those things, those don't mean anything. That's garbage. You can't put a penny price on that. Screw life lessons, man. Give me the money. That's where we are now. Yeah. That's where we are now. And I just think it's really sad, honestly, that you've got grown-ass adults, and I don't know if I've ever cussed on this podcast before, so I'm sorry, but you've got grown adults who are encouraging people to be selfish and money-absorbed and self-absorbed and social media-absorbed and acting like that's the most important thing versus, maybe not getting your way and having to overcome that and then learning and becoming a better person. But you know what? A college degree doesn't mean spit. Life lessons don't mean spit. Adversity, garbage, fighting. Oh, how wussy, toughness. Oh, please just give me the money. Does that make sense? And
it's gotta be more of a mix than it is, because right now it's just one lane. It's
and so you
lane.
see what I'm saying with like the social media comparison.
I can see it. Yeah, I can see it. And I mean, social media is very attention seeking, and it's tough. And NIL is going to be a tough situation to grapple with for a while now. And now we're seeing it just way worse than what we thought it was going to be even. And I mean, when guys are getting recruited from rosters, that's kind of the final straw, honestly.
But hey, good for them getting their paper and all that. It's just the manner in which it's being done. Oh, it's always been done that way. So why does it have to be done that way? Because it's always been done that way? Wait a second. Aren't you guys the ones saying that just because it's always been done a certain way doesn't mean it has to be that way? But I guess I don't know. It's something everybody's been talking about, and we could continue talking about, and we'll get a question about it here. How soon do you guys think until changes will be made to NIL? Did you see where Oregon tried to steal Jahdae Barron from Texas? I believe I saw where they offered him $200K to transfer.
Jeez. Yeah, I did see that, and I don't know. I don't think changes are going to be made because the NCAA hasn't done anything, hasn't said anything. They have no leadership, and so we're where we're at, and we're going to have to deal with it for the foreseeable future, and that stinks. As far as the Jahdae Barron thing, that's pretty crazy, $200,000. But, hey, these teams are going to go try to find guys that they feel like can help them win and offer them as many NIL deals as possible, and that's what Oregon was doing.
Yep. Doc Crowell, what Baylor athlete has the highest NIL that you're aware of? Or if you don't want to name names, could you give a money figure?
Yeah, I don't want to name names. I don't even know if I should name the money figure.
Probably
to be
not.
Honest. Yeah, I don't think I should. But there's a very big one. And that's about all I can say about it. But that's not, in general, how Baylor's been handling NIL. And you also have to remember NIL is not, taking place through the schools. So keep that in mind as well. But, yeah, Baylor has a very big one.
Through the schools.
Right. But sure. Baylor does have a very big one. But outside of that one that I'm thinking of, I think they're all relatively they're not like massive or crazy based on what I've heard. But outside of the one.
Yeah, I mean, and the one you could argue, and not trying to be like, we know something you don't know or anything like that, but...
I don't feel like I should... I definitely won't say the person. I don't feel like I should say the money either, though.
I mean, that's if you don't want to, that's fine. It's not my info, but I'll say that, like, if somebody comes in and they get a good NIL deal, I mean, again, good for them. And I do think that somebody in a lot of these programs at Baylor can still get the experience of, life lessons and things like that and make money at the same time. And it can all work really well and be a good relationship. And I think there's probably most of them that are like that. So my little rant a second ago is mostly based on just the numbskulls from typically some area of Miami, Florida, or Los Angeles, California, who just, why would they know any better? They've probably been this way their whole lives and don't understand that life lessons are what they are and that it's not just all about money. But, man, that's just been really gross to watch, of just people totally being dismissive of everything about the college experience and the life experience, and that's none of it added up compares to just fake money, basically. I think that's really a sad indictment of where our adults are headed, in terms of their way of thinking. And that's my generation too. But like, I hate it that's such the focus. I think NIL is very interesting. We're clearly not going to ever stop talking about it. And yes, there's some tweaks that need to be made. And yes, it's great that players are getting money, but just some of it is just kind of gross and unnecessary too. But it is what it is. So got to find a way to deal with it, just like anything else that changes over time. So thanks to everybody that had questions this week. It was a great week for Baylor with the draft and some of the spring sports like A&T and obviously men's tennis, women's tennis, got postseasons coming up, etc. So anything before we go, Grayson?
No, just another really good week. Great draft. That's just, I couldn't be happier for the guys that got drafted. Just really an amazing honor to go to the NFL. And we're going to be covering them for a long time now. And it's going to be a lot of fun to track their careers. And now just kind of looking forward to seeing what men's tennis does. And then the end of the season. School's almost out and it's almost summer, and which is kind of a barren time for us, but also a fun time to kind of talk more about the season and kind of what we see from other Big 12 teams. So I'm very curious how teams progress leading up to the fall.
Yeah, should be fun to see this close out, and then whatever other news, occurs between now and then, whether it's football recruiting or basketball recruiting, although men and women both have kind of filled up quickly and retooling their rosters. So we'll see how all that plays out as well. A lot to still see and watch unfold, but a lot has been going on, and so hopefully we've covered all the bases for you. Do appreciate questions once again, and always appreciate you listening. Thanks to Armstrong Sims and Jack McKenzie behind the scenes, and also for Grayson Grundhafer, I'm Craig Smoke. This has been the Bearcast on Sic'Em365.com.